Welcome to episode 15 of the Acknowledge to Action podcast. I am your host, Matthew Benko. In this episode, titled The Power of Storytelling, Eddie shares his military journey and its impact on his life. Enlisting in the U.S. Army in 2002, he served at Fort Hood, Texas, and faced intense combat during 2004 deployment to Iraq. Eddie's unit was featured in the National Geographic series, The Long Road Home, depicting their harrowing experiences in Sadr City based off Martha Raddatz's acclaimed book. Eddie discusses the challenges he overcame, the importance of storytelling for healing, and the support found in connecting with fellow veterans and Gold Star families. He highlights the need for inclusive spaces in higher education and community engagement for a successful transition. Tune in to hear about Eddie's journey, his current projects, and the power of sharing stories, right here on the Acknowledge to Action podcast. Eddie, hey, thank you so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation here on the Acknowledge to Action podcast.
Thank you, Matthew, for having me.
Oh, sure. I know we're going to have a great conversation. We connected a few weeks ago to get a better connection and to talk about what Acknowledge to Action is all about. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more of your story and for our listeners to hear your story as well, because it's pretty amazing.
Oh, thank you, Matthew. Yeah, you set the bar up pretty high, but we'll give it a shot, and I'm always happy to to support other veterans doing great things in this space. I think it's necessary, and it's just it gives us hope to keep veterans alive. I think that's the work that we both are tasked to do. So we'll get into it.
Yeah, no, this is great. It's all about sharing our experiences, sharing our story, because I know that's a big. I'm gonna save that for you. That's your specialty area, but to hear your story, but also to talk the significance and the power of that is something else. And you shared with me that 5-minute video that you're working on. We're going to talk more details about it, but I just watched that right before we hit record, and that was a very moving, powerful video. And based off this recording, it's going to be part of the introduction. So those listening, you probably watched it already too. So you know what I'm talking about as far as the power of that story. So Eddie, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I just hope people enjoy it, and that they can use that as an example, something that they can visually see and hear, and that gives them the opportunity to do something like that for themselves.
Yeah. Oh, no, for sure. I know we're going to talk about a lot of great access points, a lot of resources to not only help ourselves as the veteran who because it is challenging to reflect on our experiences and make sense of it. But when we're working together collaboratively to help one another, we end up helping ourselves too. So it's a win-win. And yeah.
Yeah, he definitely hit the nail on the head, and that's something that I realized when I was working on the book for Cason's children that I mentioned in the video.
Yeah.
I honestly, when I came up with the idea and gave myself that mission, I really truly thought it was for the children, right? And that was my goal, and it was, but by the time that I was able to complete it and share with them, I realized it was as much for me as it was for them.
Yeah.
And that's some of that learning, that I think takes place in reflecting and doing some of this work in the veteran space, and owning your own story and part of it. And that process really becomes, for me, that healing piece of this journey that I think most of us, if not all of us, need to really consider. And whether it's now or down the line, I think there comes a time where we have to face those memories, experiences, and good, bad, and in between.
I agree. I like how you, in your video, you said you boxed up those memories, those challenging memories. But as you unboxed it, you kind of, this is what I took. This is my takeaway from the video is the value of that and those powerful, strong memories that you had with Kason, right? You talked about his his personality, his strength, what he brought to the table physically and mentally, and you box it up. But what it took you, what you said, 10 years, I think you said it took
Yeah.
you to kind
Before
of
I went to the
acknowledge
VA,
that.
and yeah, and actually asked for help, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where that was very powerful about that, and just again, just watching that a few minutes prior to us hitting record now is really impactful and is really moving, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your military journey, the start of it, and where it led you up to your military deployment and those relationships you built that are forever a part of your experience. And I know the relationships I have, they're forever a part of us, and it's not something we could just forget, as challenging as it may
Yeah.
be, but find ways to embrace that. So I that's what I really appreciate about what we've established here just in the few times we talked, and the your experiences that you shared with me so far is just there's a lot of power to that. There's a lot of healing to that. There's a lot of encouragement to that.
Yeah, it's been a journey, right? But I think I'm hoping that through my experience that I can annotate it and share and reflect so that other people can do that as well. Whether it's in a community center, Patriots Hall here in Dripping Springs, they just built kind of like a veteran service hub. Should open their doors here pretty soon, but I'm hoping that I can do some of the work there, and also in higher ed. I think higher ed has a potential to support veterans in such a way that transformational learning and healing. Sometimes I feel like they fall a little bit short, but I think there's spaces definitely in the community, in higher ed, at the public library. I think that veterans can, even this podcast, right? It's an opportunity. It's a space for veterans to be able to share their stories, and that's really my life's work and my passion. And then, I mean, just not in the video, right? I write about it, I think about it, I live it. Before I forget, I got to give my wife a shout out, Cindy. Also, a Army combat vet. Today's her birthday,
Oh wow.
along with the Army's birthday. So I told her I definitely that's something else that we need to focus on more is really bringing up to the forefront those women veteran stories. I mean that they were out there side by side with with the gentleman, with the infantrymen as well. So those are stories that need to be told and need to be heard as well.
Wow, well, shout out to your wife, and we're recording here on Friday, June 14th. So it's going to be a couple weeks before it's produced, but it's officially June 14th is your wife's birthday, right?
Yeah.
So cool. I'm glad you brought that up. That's you're spot on. Is to acknowledge the females who fought right alongside and took part of the missions and the operations over the years, and I'm looking forward to having more women on the show as well to share their experiences as well. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, what I've learned, you have to be intentional, right? If you want more women veterans on here, then you probably got to go look for them,
Yeah.
because sometimes they're hiding, and in plain sight, but you show them the purpose and the power and the mission of your podcast here, Matthew. And, I feel like it can be a space, just as good for any veteran, right? That can come
Oh,
on
sure.
here.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And one of the ethos or the core values of Acknowledge Action is I always refer to like access and accountability. It's an access point for an individual just to hear someone's journey, to help them reflect on their own journey, and and they could put tools in their toolbox to help with that processing component that we all need to do through our experiences and through our journeys, and we could do that in a variety of different ways. That's why the Acknowledge Action has a music playlist, because music can speak to us in ways that sometimes words can't. It's a traditional written word, video, and all that. So there's a variety of different ways for us to process and kind of acknowledge, accept, and eventually take action how we see fit to to manage our circumstances, manage our situation, manage our experiences to make sense of it. And so it's not overwhelming, but it's more of a, hey, this is a part of me, this is who I am, and I'm okay with that. As some days it's tough, some moments it's tough, but it's okay because that's part of who I am. That's part of the whole package of the whole experience package, right?
Right.
At least that's kind of how I kind of summarize it. Well, that's how I package it up, right? That's how I put it in my own fashion to make sense of it. So, yeah. Well, let's start off on how you started your military journey. So, can you take us through your military journey from the moment you became involved with the military to where you are today? Just highlight a couple key moments, challenges, and transformations along the way.
So it starts in 2001. I was a senior in high school. I graduated, that May or June, and I, um, registered at the Cal State Fullerton in California, 4-year university, and I had a part-time job working with my dad there locally too. So I was on my way to being a grown-up. And 9 days before my birthday, I turned 18, September 20th. So 9/11. I watched the Twin Towers coming down from the rec center. Got there. I usually got there early, and chilled there at the rec center. And I mean, just like anybody else who experienced that moment, it's frozen in time in your memory. And I can see, 360 view right now as I'm reflecting. The big screen TV, and there's kids crying, and there's commotion. And I remember just kind of standing there still, just, not really understanding what was happening, right? At first, some people thought it was just an accident. And, as we continued through that morning, I remember I had a political science class, a 100 class that morning. And there was a TA, I think he was in the National Guard or the reserves, but he didn't make it through the whole class, right? He got called out. So that was really the beginning where I realized, like, okay, well, this is, we're on a path to something else, something big. So I finished the year there, and that summer 2002, I ended up enlisting, and I went infantry, U.S. Army, and off I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, that summer. And that summer, I mean, there was a lot of people enlisting, right? And the call to action, and Pat Tillman was actually there in basic training when I was there, right?
Oh, wow.
I was in Alpha 119. I believe he was in Echo 119. I never saw him, but definitely, we all knew he was there, right? And something that I remember is just, I think by then I might have, 18, 19 years old. And it was just, reflecting, there's a gentleman who was a professional athlete who turned down multiple millions of dollars to play football, and he's here with us, right? He's doing the same thing we're doing. So I kind of just made a mental note, and in retrospect, right, that's pretty special to to share some of that connection with him, and now as a Pat Tillman Scholar, class of 2021. So that's somebody that I really honor and respect, and just like Ahmed Kaysen from my platoon. But definitely they have a place in my ofrenda, where I light candles, and for past relatives and family, and I can say that Pat Tillman's picture's there next to Kaysen's picture.
Wow.
Yeah. So then, I ended up getting stationed in Fort Hood, Texas. I think I got there December of 2002. So really just, getting worked up to go to war, really. And we actually had orders to go during the invasion as what's the word? But anyways, we ended up getting those orders canceled, and we ended up deploying the following year. Reinforcements. We were supposed to go there as reinforcements. The war didn't last that long, so we continued to train, and I do appreciate that we did spend a lot of time in the field. I felt like we were a very well trained unit, and I was really proud to be part of 25 Cav. So we ended up deploying late March 2004, OIF 2. My platoon, fortunate for us, somebody decided to leave our Bradleys behind, and we ended up getting 8 Humvees, a couple of armored, and most of them were soft skin. At that time, the fighting was really had subsided, so they thought this would be more of a peacekeeping mission. But on April 4, 2004, when the fighting started, we ended up having a platoon from Charlie Company pinned down, and we sent the whole cavalry out to get them. A lot of soft vehicles, LMTVs, no protection, a few Bradleys, and we just got destroyed. Right, I think we had eight KIA and over 70 or 80 wounded that day, that mission. So that that really is, I don't want to say the highlight, right, but a big part of my story, and why I am the way I am, and why I am.
It was very impactful.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very impactful. And then even during that deployment, my unit was in over 100 days of combat in a 12-month rotation.
Wow.
So we definitely saw a lot of action. And I even joked with my platoon sergeant, Reginald Butler. He's a good mentor, and kind of like my Army dad. And I remember telling him one day, I was like, man, they're gonna have to make a movie about us. And he's like, you think so? I was like, yeah, I just don't see that many people going through what we've been through, right? And early on in the war. He's like, so I asked him, well, who's gonna play you in the movie? He's like, well, he's an African American, so he's like, well, Denzel's got to play me. And I always tease him. So subsequently, Martha Raddatz wrote the book The Long Road Home, and then it became a miniseries, National Geographic, and that was really cool to be a part of. But definitely Denzel didn't play him, so so I tease him about it. But it was just, like I said, at the time, I had a feeling that it was something very big, and I was still very young, and I think that also plays a part of how when we come back, how that affects us. I have a theory. I haven't done a lot of research on it, but I feel that if you engage in combat and war at a higher age, that you're less likely to develop maybe PTSD or some of the other things, because I feel like your brain's a little bit more structured, and and has those connections that it's made, and when you're younger, I think that it affects you a little bit more. But like I said, don't quote me on that. Those are just some of my thoughts on that.
No, that's very interesting. As far as, yeah, I think we're more impressionable at a younger age, 17, 18. You remember things more clearly. I don't know if that's the right word, clearly, but they're definitely more impactful, more influential than you say, like as a 30-year-old who goes, 35-year-old. Because like you said, I think there's a strong argument in case for that. But I want to just clarify. So I know you were joking with your platoon sergeant and said, hey, they need to make a movie. This is probably pre-Netflix days, so this is it's like, hey, they just need to make a traditional movie. And then your unit, so The Long Road Home is a National Geographic, is it a docuseries or
a miniseries?
A miniseries about your unit and your experience.
Yeah. There for April 4th, 2004. Yeah, based off the book of Martha Raddatz.
Wow. So that was but you sensed that even before that was even a thing, right? Before that even became to fruition. We use a lot of humor in the military to kind of make sense of challenging situations, but here you are in arguably what could be the most challenging time in your life for a given period of time, right? And yeah, let's make a movie, and yeah, I want this guy to be your platoon sergeant. I want Denzel Washington. You're probably thinking about who you want to play you, and then a couple years later, or if my time's right, or in the future, National Geographic say, yeah, we're doing this. They made it. Tell us a little about that series. Tell us about The Long Road Home, how that came to be, and because that's very interesting. That's incredibly interesting.
I have the book here. It's my copy that Martha Raddatz dedicated to me, but I think it came out in 2007.
All right.
So the importance of the book is really, my understanding, right? It's the storytelling component. Here somebody, anybody, right? Martha Raddatz, she took the time to tell our story, right? So for a long time, Matthew, if I would have met you 10, 15 years ago, and you was like, hey, let's chat, and I mean, you're a veteran as well, and so the walls aren't too high. But if you ask me about my experiences, what I would do is I would throw this book at you. You're right. I like, hey, go read The Long Road Home, and then and then after a couple beers maybe, and then we can chat, because I really didn't have that skill set. I hadn't gone through I hadn't processed a lot of these experiences. So I tell people that I'm really grateful that she took the time, but it gave me time to figure out my story, my experiences, and it was just a placeholder, that I could share with people, right? If you really wanted to know, and I couldn't really tell you, you could start there, and then kind of like I just shared that video with you as well, right, Matthew? You
Hmm.
watch the video, and then you can have a conversation about it. But it's these stories that really are the bridge to people, the connections that we make. So that for me, that's the significance, and I can't thank her enough for taking the time to put that book together and capture those stories, right? And then subsequently, I think it was supposed to be a movie. I don't know what happened, if maybe too much time passed by, but National Geographic ended up picking it up, and they actually built the set there at Fort Hood. And
Wow.
I mean, if you get a chance to watch it, it is really, really accurate. Um, I don't remember the name of the person who built the set, but yeah, I did get to meet him and thank him as well. But it it's exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
So I get invited, and I go over there, and I walk into the set, and I mean, it's like you see some trailers, and then you see some uniforms hanging, and then all of a sudden I'm in Sadr City, and it's a total mind trick, right? Because I'm here in Fort Hood, and this is my home base, and another place that I can call home, and now I'm in Sadr City, right? So it was pretty cool, but it was kind of crazy, right? In
Hmm.
that sense of reliving some of those experiences just come back rushing to your head. And I tell people the only thing that really saved my sanity at that moment was really that the smell wasn't there, and how smell is an important part of memories, right? So if you think about
Yeah.
your grandma's cookies, you can probably, if you smell those cookies baking, you probably have a memory, if that memory is attached to your grandmother of making those cookies, and your brain will make those connections.
The olfactory senses.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
yeah. So like I tell people, if there's some way to bottle that smell, then it wasn't a very pleasant smell there in Solder City. And they threw it. There would be no way for me to make sense that I wasn't in Solder City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, who else from your unit was there? How did that work? So you got the invite to go to the set, right? To where where they're making this series. Who else was there? What sort of collaboration took place?
I mean, I couldn't tell you really, the back end of it. I was kind of just a veteran going along for the ride, but I did see a lot of other vets from my unit, and Martha Raditz was there. Um, and I'm sure the producers of Nat Geo, the show, which I can't remember the name. Names are definitely the hardest part for me to remember
Yeah.
with folks, so I apologize for that. But
I'm the same way. If I don't jot them down and I don't see them, yeah, it's
yeah,
okay. No,
after
I
this call, I'll
understand.
probably make a list of all the people. It's like I know them, right? And I say, but yeah, it's definitely always been a challenge for me. But yeah, so I got to check out the set, and then kind of came back home, and back to your regular life, and then I don't remember how long before, but they had the premiere, and we got invited to see that as well, the first episode. And a lot of the families were there, Gold Star. So we lost 8 soldiers, so we definitely have a few Gold Star families that are part of of our community, the veteran community. So and they're I've been grateful to be a part of their support groups as well, and that's something that I really had to one of the hurdles that had to get over, specifically the Casey family, because for a long time I was I was afraid and scared to reach out, because Kaysen was killed in my truck, and he was protecting us, and I just felt that there was a debt that I had to pay there, right? That he had sacrificed his life, and that was just the perspective that I had at the time, right? And I would in my head it would be thoughts of like if I spoke to his widow or met the kids, that they would hate me, right? That they wouldn't want to talk to me or they wouldn't want to see me. And that was all in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So through fast forward about 10 or 15 years from the battle. But I can say when we came back from our deployment, right, that we had a ceremony and Gold Star families were there, and we were walking, to the bleachers or to the area we were gonna be in, and I remember walking behind Allison, Kaysen's widow, and I wanted to tap her, and I wanted to give her a hug. I wanted to say I'm sorry, but at that moment, I couldn't get myself to you know to
Mm-hmm.
connect with her, right? And that's something that really sat with me for a long time, and that was kind of one of my goals, my personal goals in my healing journey was I need to be able to connect and have a conversation. Um, so yeah, about 10 or 15 years later, I got myself all put together, ready to go, and I ended up visiting them in Birmingham, Alabama. Knocked on the door and I said, I'm here, I'm ready. And like in the video, I talk about all I said was what took me so long, right? They had been waiting for me.
Wow.
That's something that I feel a lot of veterans in these situations where there's Gold Star families involved, right? Your battle buddies were KIA, or that there's a big fear to make that leap, and I feel like they might not be lifelong friends. We are, we're really connected, and we're supportive, and we've had reunions, and they've come to visit me, and I visit them, and it's even hard for me to believe that there was a time when I didn't know them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, they're and making the book for the kids. All these little pieces, helped me get to the place where I can knock on that door and say, "Hey, I'm here, right?" And I'm ready. And I told her I was willing to sit on the curb, right? I'm here now, and wait for that door to open. But there was none of that, and it's tough, and those conversations can be tough, but for me, it was worth it, right? Because they're now part of my family, right? And I feel like I'm a part of theirs, um, and it's still very sad that she became a widow at such a young age and left two children to grow up, without their father. But that just like Pat Tillman, right? I try to honor Kaysen every day and do the good work that I do, and I now have a different perspective, right? I don't owe him, he sacrificed himself, for his battle buddies, but there's not a debt there to pay, right? I honor him, and you know I try to live the best that I can, and support our battle buddies still, and be a good father and a husband and a friend. And I think that's the right perspective.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty powerful. How you process that, and how to you said the timeline of 10 years, right? For you to go to that door and knock on the door and say, I'm here. What do you credit, or what helped you get to that point? I'm not asking why it took 10 years, because I think that's just a number, it's just a timeline number. But what I think the important value, what I'm trying to ask here is, what helped you get to that point,
Yeah,
to be able to do that, to meet yourself where you're at and do what you felt needed to be done for yourself and for the whole process.
that's a good question, Matthew. Yeah, I felt the first big steps is acknowledging that I had a problem, right? For a long time, I was like, oh, there's nothing wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought about PTS as something that I could overcome by myself in my own mind. And just like everything, there's seasons, right? I feel great sometimes, and sometimes I would not feel good at all, and it just came and went, right? And when I was at those lowest points, and I felt like I was all, I was on the floor and needed some help, and very close a few times where I thought, okay, this is it. I'm gonna go get help now, and the next morning I might wake up a little bit better. Oh, I made it. I made it through. And but it became a moment where I realized, and credit to my family. They would tell me, like, it's okay to go get help. You need help, but until I took that first step and really,
Hmm.
you got to knock on the door. You got to open that door and go in there and say, I need help, right? And the day I did, I mean, I remember that day clearly too. And I walked in, at that point with my book, right? And it gave me some comfort. It's kind of like, here I have my battle buddies with me, and they're walking with me, and our story is
Yeah.
in here, right? Our story's in here, and I thought maybe they won't believe me, right? That I've been through these experiences, and here's my proof. There's a story in there. So
Yeah.
I needed something, right, as a support, and I don't think I've ever shared that, right? That I actually walked into the office with the story, right, with the book, as a support for me, and they didn't ask me about the book, or they didn't, it was just a vet carrying a book, right? But for
Yeah.
me, it was so powerful in that I felt like I had those stories, and I had my battle buddies there with me when I went to go ask for help finally. And I got treatment. I've done prolonged exposure, it's cognitive behavioral therapy for sleep, acupuncture at the VA, even hypnotherapy. I'll try it all, right?
Yeah.
And I say that, sincerely about, as I feel like as a leader for myself and also for my battle buddies, that hey, if Matthew's in a bad shape, he's like, man, there's this therapy they're trying to, and I can tell you, hey, I already tried that one, and this is what it entails, right? Kind of like putting yourself to the fire first, in order to help others, and that's really, the approach that I've taken. Same thing with storytelling. My PhD, my dissertation, really is a deep dive into my own experiences, and I put myself through the fire, right? And it was pretty tough. It took me 2 years to write, and it sometimes it took me close to the edge, of suicide ideation. It was just going deep into these experiences, um, and but I came out of it. I think a stronger person, a better person, and with the skill set that now that's really the work that I really that I support, that I create, and want to see veterans go through this process. But you shouldn't need to be able to go get a PhD to take these deep dives, right? It's there's other ways, like you understand, podcasting, right, or creative writing, or writing poems, taking pictures, even that video that video was a lot easier than writing my dissertation. It had
Yeah.
artifacts, right? And so I'm coming to learn that there's so many ways, but I think writing your story, it's pretty powerful, but I would say that it's the most challenging way to be able to share your story. um, we don't want to blame academia for everything, but the bar is pretty high, right? But that video, 5 minutes with my items that I brought, I'm telling you, Matthew, it was night and day, right? It was just a lot easier to process those memories through those items and in video, and that's what I'm saying, that we have to keep creating these different spaces, because most vets, they have everything boxed up still, right?
You bring up some great points, and you're talking about access points for veterans, and really anybody. This goes beyond the veteran space, right? Anybody who deals with life, which is all of us human beings, right? We need access points to process and make sense of our experiences. Good, challenging, bad, ugly, good, bad, ugly, right? We need those access points. And there isn't a one size fits all. Videos, I mean, it's that is at the top of the list. It seems like with YouTube and all that stuff. But like you said, you could capture so much in just 5 minutes, like you said. Whereas writing, you got to put the work in, and it's challenging, and you may hit some roadblocks and whatnot. But there's other ways to do it, like through art form and through talk therapy, and through exercise, through non I don't want to say tangible, but something that doesn't produce a product, right? There's something to that to help us normalize and make sense and just really inventory our thoughts and our feelings, because that's important. Thoughts and feelings, as much as we may think that they're different, that there is that they are a very there's a close, I'll use like a symbiotic relationship with that when we're processing. we have to acknowledge those thoughts, and we have to acknowledge and embrace those feelings and emotions that come with it. But there's a variety of different ways to do that, like you mentioned, Eddie. Like, and we're going to talk about this here shortly. But you went on to get your PhD just recently, right? I think within the last 6 months, you've earned your PhD, right?
Yeah, I
Or
graduated last spring.
last spring. So
Yeah.
about a year. So you went on. I mean, you took a deep dive because you met yourself where you're at, and then you pursue that. So we're talking about that here shortly. But I like how you mentioned the access points, and there's a variety of different ways that we should. I'm trying to think of the right word, the right action verb, right?
Yeah.
Need, should, ought to, but we have to do something to kind of normalize that, to process that, to make sense of it. And it could be a variety of different, and going back to therapy, like you said, whether it's CBT, the cognitive processing therapy, or CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, hypnosis, inoculation therapy. I mean, there's such a variety.
Yeah.
But it's not a one size fits all, but it's usually a collection. It's a variety of those different approaches that can help us meet ourselves where we're at, get the help we need, and start that healing process.
Yeah.
So I just
Yeah,
wanted
exercise
to.
is a big part. They say that's the best medicine you could, but it's hard when you're not feeling good to go exercise, but then you don't exercise, you don't feel good. So that's the cycle that, the unending cycle that I think affects, a lot of veterans.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something to keep in mind. That it's interesting. I don't feel good, therefore I don't exercise. But that, yeah, it's a constant. Yeah, it's. Excuse me. So talk about your transition from the military. Here you are with a PhD, a philosophy of doctorate in what?
In education.
In education. So you have a PhD in education, right? That is not that took a lot of years. That took a lot of years to get to. So talk about how you identified that and how you, because I imagine that's not something you just wake up and say, I want to go for my PhD. I imagine it was a buildup. It was based off experiences and a number of experiences that led you to pursue that and achieve that.
We definitely have to like to read and write, a lot. I think it was PhD is stack it up higher and deeper. Yeah, it's for me. Learning has always been a passion of mine. Even as a child, I was fortunate enough to have an encyclopedia at my home, and that was like one of my most prized collections. And I really thought that all the knowledge of the world was in those books at the time. But yeah, just for me, reading books was a way, to really escape, what was going on. Even during my first deployment, I dropped out of college and to enlist, and luckily we had a lot of care packages, and people would send us books, and I have some pictures still, being on break and reading some books downrange. Which I show my kids. It's like, hey, see, that's always been a reader. But that's something that I really enjoyed, and eventually I decided to go back to night school, to community college, and kind of get going. I started with one class at a time, usually like a Wednesday or Thursday night, and all the adults go to those classes because they mostly have jobs during the day. And it's really a hobby that I love, right, to learn, and I just continued through there, and I ended up graduating with my bachelor's in history and political science from Arizona State. And I thought once I once I got out of the service, that I would be a high school history teacher. So I did the teacher prep program there at USC to do that. But then the MBV, the Masters in Business for Veterans program, had just started. Actually, was in cohort 4, and that really opened up my eyes. It was a program designed only for veterans, right? So in this 1 year long program, you're supported just by veteran students, and that was something that I hadn't really seen or experienced in higher ed, because most of the times you might be the only military veteran, one maybe one or two in each class. So, I guess I can talk a little bit more about that later. But once I finished that program, I met Dr. Terrell. He was a inaugural director, and he's been a big mentor and supporter of me, and actually working on a book together now. But he was really somebody that I admire and looked up to, and he's a military veteran, I think from the Korean War era, but he's got his PhD, and he taught us the leadership course. So super cool to kind of close that circle and continue to work with him. And so then from that, I moved out to Texas, 2017, and I thought I was going to homeschool my son, Eddie, who just graduated high school. So I didn't really get to
Oh
homeschool
wow.
him. It didn't work. It didn't work the way that I thought it would, but not in a negative way. The district that we landed here, Dripping Springs, that really took care of him and kind of left me without a job. So for a year I was kind of transitioning, figuring out what to do next. So I told my wife, hey, I'm going to keep, if my son's doing well in school, then I'll keep going. So applied to a program there at Texas State in education, and really went from there. And some of the two topics that I really had in mind for my dissertation, being in education field, one, it was school safety. So with the military background, and unfortunately all the school shootings and bullying, and just the bad
Hmm.
the bad spot that some schools are in. And I think it's the school culture has a lot to do with it, right? Building that school culture, that positive culture. But so that was kind of one of my ideas, and I published a few articles on that. And the other idea was really taking that deep dive, into myself and into my battle buddies, and so I focused on veteran issues of transition and reintegration. I'm fortunate that in my department they let me study that. Because the veteran issues really don't fit in any department. Um,
Yeah.
Schools of social work are really usually the veteran programs are in there, but nothing against social work. But I just feel like we can be attacking the veteran issues from different perspectives. And for me, education is everything, right? Even I don't know if you've heard that. Even do you know what happens when you die? No, you're still learning, right? Even when you die, you're still learning. you
That
know,
there's a character strength inventory that I think the University of Pennsylvania, through, I don't know if it's through positive psychology. I'll put it on a hyperlink on the YouTube channel. But there's 24 core strengths, and one of them is love of learning, and that's what comes to mind when you talk about that. Like, from the day we are born to the day we die, it's just, whether it's through social integration, formal learning to earn a PhD, to basic training, we're always learning,
yeah,
the directly and indirectly, whether we like it or not. It's a part of our organic makeup,
yeah,
right?
it's a part of your being. Yeah, and I think most problems that we have can be solved through education, right? Whether we
Yeah.
acknowledge it or not, it's usually tied in.
So you were in your first year of college when you left and decided to enlist, right? So that was your first introduction to college, and then you got out. So what was your first then access point following the military, where you said to yourself, "All right, I did my time in the army. I'm back home. I'm transitioned. I'm focused now on getting this education. I'm gonna pursue my education." Where did that start for you?
I mean, so I guess going back to school after I went back to school while I was still in the service, just taking like a class at a time. But I was just reading a lot, and just the thought came to like, well, why don't I get something out of all the reading? Maybe I'll write a couple papers and read a couple books, and I'll get a degree, and that's really how it started. But I just realized through going through dropping out the community college 4-year graduate school and then a PhD program, was like a lot of these spaces aren't inclusive, for veterans. I remember, many times where, it just seemed like being an undergrad is like, they're babysitting you. Right. And here I was in the service, and, I thought I was an adult and I could manage myself as an adult, but if you miss more than 2 classes, they had to drop your grade. And I was like, well, if my job calls me, if the service calls me, I gotta go. Like there's,
Yeah.
So little anecdotes like that I realized, we could do better, in creating more inclusive spaces for veterans. And higher ed's challenging at it on its own. So we shouldn't, make make it more difficult for veterans to achieve that. And that's 10, 15 years ago. I think, I started back, I think in the
Did you go
mid
back to community
2000s.
college? Did
Yeah,
you go back
yeah.
to the community college that you left, or was it a different community college?
No, it was a different one, but
Okay.
I guess the time span, I think overall it's probably close to 15 years that I spent in education, in
Wow.
schools.
So
Yeah.
so the community college led you to your 4-year
Mm-hmm.
institution. You
Yeah.
got your bachelor's degree, and then you went on to get your master's degree, your graduate
Yeah.
degree, then on up to
Yeah.
your PhD in education.
Yeah. So I
Wow,
have a total of 5, 2 bachelors, 2 masters, and a PhD.
wow.
Yeah.
And it's a different type of construct and organization, so the DoD, whether regardless of what branch, the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, now the Space Force, right?
Don't
Who am I
forget the
missing
Coast
here?
Guard.
Coast Guard. Yeah. Huge. So, Department of Defense, huge. I think the largest government organization we have. Education as a whole construct, is a huge organization and a construct. And hearing your journey and your story, that's why I gravitated towards the pursuit of education, because it was a different type of organization. It was a different type of construct, but it made sense to me. And it's what led me to stick with it, achieve some certain goals, and go on to do what I did, right? And I think that there's something to be said for that. But at this flip side of the coin, like you said, Eddie, there are some challenges with us being veterans and the space that comes with that. And some schools get it. Some schools get it better than others. And just like the other branches of service, some the way certain branches do business, they do it right. Others, and my point in saying that is organizations can learn from one another, and kind of not do like a rinse and repeat or a plug and play model, but have that collaborative piece to say, hey, what can we do for veterans? And a big part of that is their family members too, because that is a significant population that is equally as impacted as the veterans themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I think at the beginning of my journey was really, kind of focusing on my own healing as the individual veteran. I think the next step is, those bridges with family, right? I feel like a lot of veterans come back and, they've changed. Of course, they've changed. They've gone through some experiences that most people,
Yeah.
don't understand, right? But it's the storytelling, I think, that helps bridge that, right? So even having some types of stories that you can share with your kids, and they can connect to your military experiences, right? And then connecting with your family more. And then the last piece is the community, right? For me, a successful veteran transition is really plugging back into the community that you choose, and being a part of that, and being able to share those gifts, right? Whether it's, a teacher or a coach, or, you know, a bus driver, whatever it is, right? That you can come back and be a part of a community, volunteer work. There's just different ways in employment, but a lot of vets still kind of closed off or boxed up, and if they choose to just chill the rest of their days on the rocking chair watching the sunset, that's great too, right? But I think for me, that successful transition is to be part of your community again.
Yeah, that's real interesting. Interesting enough, I did a presentation on that today with the Travis Manning Foundation, and it's one of the organizations that I'm a part of, where we talk about character does matter, and the big component, one of the core values of that organization is community building, getting engaged with your community. And there's a lot of organizations that do that. There's I mean, we could go off on a sidetrack here with the evolution or the de-evolution of the American Legion and the VFW. They're struggling for membership, but really at its essence, at its whole, it was a access point for community. And some of us are more outgoing and more extroverted in terms of us being able to identify that and to kind of work our way through that door.
Yeah.
Others, it's a little more challenging. Others, it takes time, whether it's through being asked or finding that right access point. And I think you're spot on, Eddie, as far as like for veterans, a big, huge variable to transition is community engagement.
Yeah.
Connect, whatever that may be. And that's a huge portfolio, a huge, but it's just something to keep in mind as we, that's a big portion of the acknowledge to action, is acknowledging what you need to do as the individual to take action that's best for you, to manage a situation or to achieve a certain goal, right? That's just like my Cliff Notes version of acknowledge to action. And you touched upon all that by some of the things you've said, and I can't agree with you more or emphasize anymore how important that community membership is. And it doesn't have to be grandstanding and doing all these things like that come with that sort of focus and energy, but it's something that you're connected to, that you're committed to, that's consistent and reliable. I believe that is a huge piece. But if it was easy to just administer that across the board, whether it's in TAPS class or through a CBT or a briefing, then we wouldn't be having the challenges that we do. But it's through, like you said, through storytelling and these conversations for people to like to challenge themselves. Yeah. Like, oh, I'm kind of picking up what Eddie's putting down and what Matt and Eddie are talking about. Like, man, I may be in wherever this part of the United States, but I'm going to go out there and just challenge myself and just open myself up. Not necessarily have to challenge yourself, but open yourself up to those opportunities to find that access point, to put those tools in your toolbox to help with the, I'll call it post MEPS. I've said this in a couple previous episodes. Post MEPS, for us, the MEPS we know, we're like, oh, MEPS, the military entering processing station. But MEPS now, to me, and I've gotten through this through a couple of the previous guests, is mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and social. So it's a MEPS with 2 S's. I believe that is a foundation or a reference point that we need to focus on. Like, okay, some days or some periods in our readjustment or transition, or like you said, we have our ups and downs. It's like, I need to focus on the mental side of me right now. Or, hey, this phase of my right now, where I'm at now, is emotional. Or no, I want to focus more on the physical. No, I want to focus more on the spiritual. I want to focus more on the social. And there's a lot of different ways. Speaking of like artwork, how we were talking about art, I was saying this I have a 6-year-old son, Teddy, and his favorite color is green. I was like, how many colors of green are there? He's like, oh, green. I was like, no, shade. We talk about shades. I was like, and he's big on this number, infinity. Like, infinity is limitless. I was like, arguably, so are your ideas. So are the shades of green and blue. There are hundreds and thousands, if not, maybe not infinity, but at some point. But there's a lot of different ways. So if my favorite color is green, is it dark green? Is it light green? There's a lot of different ways. My point is, when we're dealing with mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and social, there's a lot of different ways to address that. And storytelling in whatever format we want it to be in could come in a podcast, could come in a video. And if you want to talk about like what you're doing now to just kind of capstone some of these things you talked about today, is like, what are you doing now with now that you're, I don't know, what's the right word? Postgraduate? You got your post, like, here, man, you've reached the pinnacle of arguably what your educational career could be, right? As far as achievement goes, as far as earning unless you're going to get multiple
Yeah,
PhDs, you know.
no.
But what what am I saying here?
Yeah, what's next, right? What am I working
What
on? Yeah,
what so you put in the 10, 15 years of just
yeah,
plugging away at education, right? And you're what we've talked about, and what we've started the podcast off is storytelling, sharing our journey and helping us understand and that. Where are you at with that, and what is your mission now with that?
yeah. So I mean, I'll be honest, right? When I graduated, and PhD is a terminal degree. There's nothing else past that, right? Unless you, like you said, well, I go get a law degree or something. But
Yeah, yeah,
I think the challenge was really that part, kind of like the military, right? We all gotta leave the military one day, whether you do one tour or 30 years. Someday you have to go, right? And
yeah,
it kind of was the same thing for my educational career. I got to the end, and it had been challenging, the earlier months, and kind of thinking like, well, what do I do next, right? Because I think part of that educational system, that just feeling like we can be a part of it, is it has its seasons, right? You're from school in the fall and the spring, you're off on summers, and your class times, and you got homework, and it keeps you busy. I think in a positive way. But when that finishes, and just like leaving the service, right? I became another transitioning veteran, but this time with a PhD. So really, what I've been focusing on is using, what I learned in higher ed, through my dissertation, my autoethnography, the books that I've read, the experience that I've had, to really help support other veterans do some of the work that we're talking about, right? So one of the projects that I have with Dr. Jarrell, my mentor from USC, we're compiling almost 30 stories from USC alum, and really focusing on those transition and reintegration challenges. And we're hoping to publish that by the end of this year. And it's been really cool. It's been also challenging, right? To help other people, other veterans, to go through something similarly that I went through, right? And we've been at it for about a year and some change now. And we just realized that you really need support systems in place to do some of this heavy lifting.
yeah.
Some assets that we had, right, that we all knew each other from, we all had this two common themes. We're all veterans, and then we're all alums from this program. So we got going pretty quick on the project. But as the stories were coming through, people were dropping out, and Dr. Tro and I, we held Zooms every other week for the duration that they were writing, right? And that became a support group, peer-to-peer support group, and another space to share stories, right, through this journey. And now, the end piece, really collecting, the 4 pieces for each individual chapter that we'll be highlighting. It's a picture that represents you, a short bio, the story, and then lastly, a 1-page reflection of this process. And I mean, for me, well, the stories are really cool to read and very insightful. But those 1-page reflections of, like, those wow moments, those light bulbs. I mean, that's, as an educator, right? That's, for me, that's where you learn the most, right? When you pause and you reflected on this process of storytelling, and even, being okay with this being published, and that's a whole different, set of challenges, right? One thing is to write your own story. Another thing is to share it, with family, with the
Oh, yeah,
public, right? So, and
yeah.
there's some little things that you can do there, right? Where I tell people, for yourself, just lay it out there, right? If nobody else is going to see it but you, just let it fly. Once you're thinking about sharing it with people, then you need to go back and see, okay, are there things that I want to, take away? Want some things that I'm not ready to share? But 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a lot less and less every time. Like, you get more comfortable sharing some of these pieces of information. I mean, and it does take courage, right? It's kind of like taking that first step to meet the Kaysen family. It's not just going to happen by itself, right?
Hmm.
You have to put in that work. And some people did, I guess, erase some things that they wouldn't want to share, and we were okay with that. And the big part of that is owning your own story, right? I'm not writing your story. You're writing your story, Matthew, and you're going to share it, and you're going to own it. And another challenge that we had was really, people kind of comparing their stories. Like, if I invited, hey, Matthew, you want to be part of this project? We're writing our stories. oh, well, my story's not that good. It's like, for whatever reason, whatever branch, and it didn't matter. And these are pretty high achieving, high speed individuals, right? From USC, accomplished people, proud to be part of that group. And, that's what the professor and I would hear a lot. And I think that's something else that we need to, whatever that our service was, be proud of your service and be proud of who you are and what you've done, and own your own story, right? And there's a lot of power in that. So that's
That's
one
great.
that's one project.
So is it that's going to be accessible? So that this project that you just talked about, that's going to be a collection of veterans' journeys, experiences that they wrote, but you help facilitate and kind of help, like you almost as their project manager, putting all the pieces together and getting X amount of veterans' stories and journeys into this finished piece, accessible piece for us, for anybody to read and access.
Yeah. So hopefully by the beginning of the year, we're shooting for that. Yeah, it's been a great journey, and Professor and I are still learning through this process, so that I hope to create, write my own book from my dissertation and some of these projects, and really be able to capture the process as a whole, and help Matthew, if you want to create some of these spaces and facilitate some of the lessons learned and some of the work and ideas that I've gone through and experienced. So that's another a follow on for me.
Wow.
And then at Texas State University, I with the help of the library, I created a journal for veteran students called Jive, Journal of
Okay.
Interactive Veteran Experiences. Yeah, and the idea behind that was really, we talked about having other methods, other modalities to share your story besides writing it. You know,
Yeah.
so that's been cool. The library was grateful enough to give, I think, 20 scholarships last in the spring to veteran students who submitted. So we've been collecting those and working through those, and hopefully we'll have the first publication um, to be able to show on the website, and they're supposed to be interactive. So we have Dr. Gwen. He's the head of emergent technologies there, and he does a lot of 3D virtual reality type stuff. So I don't really know too much about it, but I know it's super cool, and it'll be interactive. So look, but for me, it was creating these spaces, right, for veterans to be able to share their stories in different ways, and I'm really grateful for the support from Alkek One and the library there at Texas State.
This is great information. I'm going to get all this on the YouTube channel and the Acknowledged Action website. To speaking of access, so we're able to provide this information and these access points to learn more about Jive and learn more about the great things that you're doing. So whether it's going directly to the source there, if they're in that part of the country, or however it works, or it's like, hey, this sounds something similar, I'm going to find it in my local community, or give somebody inspiration to do it in their own way that's applicable to help the veterans, the family members, and all that in that part of the country. That's what I like about this, is we get motivation from so many different sources to connect, to engage, to collaborate, all that stuff, all those important things that we need to do as a community, as a whole, to help each other out. And I don't know what the exact science is on this, but we talked about exercise being one of the best forms of mental health, right? As far as like physically it's good for us, but mentally it helps with anxiety and all that stuff, right? But they also say, like, when you help somebody, like generally help somebody without anything, like without any unexpected return, like it's not a transactional sort of exchange. It's like, hey, you need some help, just because they say that's one of the endorphins or the dopamine that you get from that is really hard to match. It doesn't really get much better than that, generally speaking, as far
Yeah.
as what we're able to do at any given time, given the set of experiences in the moment. So when we help somebody just genuinely, it makes us feel good. It doesn't. Yeah, it's nice when we get a pat on the back or we get some sort of social media acknowledgement. Yeah, that's like bonus points, right? But I think the core value is like, no, help somebody. And I think as a whole, as a society, it'd be nice if we get more towards that model, which I know we're capable. There's a lot of good things we do as a society as a whole, more often than not. But it's nice when those things get highlighted more than the not so great things. Anyway, I don't want to go down that road, but it's I just wanted to the takeaway of what you're saying, Eddie, is just having those access points, helping each other out, getting connected with the community, and staying engaged.
And even here in Dripping Springs, we're really fortunate, right? Patriots Hall, I think you definitely highlight that. It's a veteran center, right? That community members raised $10 million and got a piece of land, and there's a building there, where veterans and families will be able to get services and supports, and hopefully I can be a part of that. You reminded me when you were talking about the VFW and the American Legion. Those spaces were useful for veterans past, and I think and I'm grateful for those spaces. But I think right now, kind of like Patriots Hall is leading the way and making these places more accessible, more family friendly, and just
that's a good point.
It's a different space, right? An additional space, and I think that the moral of the story is if these spaces don't exist, that people like the founders of Patriots Hall, or the creator of Jive, or the creator of your podcast, right? We're just people with ideas that want to help. And especially for the veteran community, that I think, we can't do enough. We're losing veterans to suicide every day. So that's a big driving point for me is, what we're doing is it going to help veterans, stay alive? If yes, then let's do it. If no, then, is that something that I want to invest my time? Right. And there's plenty of great projects. But that's just really the focus that I have, and the mission and my own vision of the space in the world that I want to live in, and lead by example, right? If I think definitely from that Masters in Business and Veterans program, the entrepreneurship, I'm not a business owner, but I definitely took some of those entrepreneurship lessons. Like, if it doesn't exist, who's stopping you from creating it?
Yeah, it is yourself, essentially. Like, I mean, I know it's work and whatnot, but wow, Eddie, you provided a lot of great points today, a lot of great messages. What message how would you summarize? So like on a what message would you like to share with our listeners as they navigate their own paths, both within and beyond the military, or wherever they may be on their journey? What message did you have for them? Because there's a lot of great takeaways with what you already said already, but I want to kind of just get it in a nice summary package, if possible. I know it's a loaded question, but
and it's fair, but I think it's something that I'm really still working on. But I from my knowledge and experience, and just from deep in my heart, I feel like the stories, right? You get a bunch of veterans together anywhere in this planet, and what happens? They start sharing stories, and it's just so powerful when you see a group, of vets together, and in a reunion, or at a barbecue, and you see that joy, you see those smiles, you see all that, those hard times really disappearing, melting away, right? And you see this person that sees, that feels alive and just full of joy, and that's really what I feel when I'm with with veterans, just sharing a meal or having a drink. So there's power in community, right? And I think just leaning on some of that, and really reflecting on those experiences that are unique, but that that shouldn't be kept boxed up, for yourself and for others, right? Play with some of those memories and deconstruct them, construct them, and reconstruct them to something that's useful, right? Like the video that I shared, for a long time. I mean, if you mentioned Case's name, I would just be overwhelmed with memories, good, bad, and in between, and I wouldn't be able to function in terms of communicating with you, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I realized that video is, that's 20 years of work on myself to be able to share that story,
Wow.
that single story, right? But all stories aren't like that, and being able to share some of these stories with yourself, with each other, with the community, that's really the bridge of understanding. That's really the way to move forward as a community, and that's a way to keep veterans alive, right? Because isolation is what kills.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to get out of our what how do I want to say this? We have to challenge ourselves to get it may feel a little uncomfortable at first to get out of that isolation state, but it sets us up on a path and a journey that equips us to be connected, to heal, and all that stuff. And I'm looking over here as I jotted the name of the National Geographic series and the book that was written about your unit, The Long Road Home. What a very meaningful name and title, The Long Road Home. So whether it's through that experience that you and your unit went through, or really anybody who's served overseas, and then you have to be overseas in the military, it can be a long road home, and we should mentally prepare ourselves for that. Well, what does that mean? And we could really pull the layers about, but that's just something to keep in mind. And having a variety of different ways to process and make sense of that is so important, because putting your toolkit together to help do that is so important. Going back to the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, social piece, it's a long, and it's ongoing. It's an ongoing. We're on that journey, just like learning. That journey is ongoing, and I don't know if there's an end point. I mean, there's waypoints, there's mile markers, of course, and it's like, okay, I get, but we have to stay in motion. We have to still, like the river of life. We got to stay in motion and just keep going. I don't know, that's kind of how I process it and make sense of it.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on, Matthew. And yeah, I always tell myself, yeah, The Long Road Home is a fitting title, and and I think it hits the mark, right? But I think I can add, it's a long road home, but don't forget your stories, right?
Yeah, there's, oh, that's great. So what I'm gonna do is on the YouTube channel and access. I will get all the information out, so individuals listening to that, if this doesn't pique your interest, I don't know what will. But go. I know I'm gonna go check it out. I'm gonna find this day and age. It's real easy to find stuff. YouTube it, Google it, whatever. Long road home. But I'll make a nice, easy, accessible web link for that, along with the book, The Long Road Home as well. Author's name again. I'm with you on names. Let's just
Martha Raddatz.
Martha Raddatz. Okay,
Yeah.
we were going to give proper shout outs in the written format. Okay, so that way, if people are like, "What's he say?" It's right there. It's accounted for on that. And the 5-minute video, if you didn't see the introduction, if you're listening to this and wondering what that 5-minute video is about, who you serve with, Ahmed Kaysan, right? Watch it. It's go back to the YouTube video and watch the first 5 minutes of this particular conversation what we're having, because it's a very moving piece, incredibly well produced, and you could just feel the emotion and the passion behind that, Eddie. So I'm gonna watch it quite a few times, because that was something special. And with your permission, I'd like to have it accessible on the Acknowledge Action podcast and incorporate it with this episode, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. It's been a real pleasure, and I told you this from the moment I met you. I'm not one to really look for the limelight and speak about myself, but I think it's important, and it's a waypoint, like you talked about, of where I am personally in my journey, and that I can share some of my experiences and my journeys, and my lessons learned, and my knowledge that I've gained. So it's just another way to give back, right? And that's how I process it, so that I can be okay with being on a screen and being recorded and listened to. So thank you for creating this space, Matthew, and helping veterans share their stories.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you trusting me. I value our relationship that we've established, and we're gonna continue to build upon. You're always welcome as a guest here, and through future collaborations, I have some ideas on making an interactive podcast, like once a month, where we have an open hour where veterans could call in, and to be determined with that. So, but that's something an idea I have, and it would be great to have you as a reoccurring guest on that, just as a co-host, right? So we could collaborate together. I'm going to ask you to share one more thing for our listeners. We're building, it's a pretty amazing playlist that we've established so far, the Acknowledge to Action playlist, which is now accessible on YouTube Music as well as Spotify. So those are the two. Apple and I'm not knocking Apple, but I had a hard time creating an Apple accessible Apple Music playlist. So YouTube Music, Spotify. What song do you want to dedicate to the Acknowledge to Action playlist?
When I got to see B.B. King play in San Diego, I think that was my first concert ever, and so I'll dedicate the song "Lucille" by B.B. King.
Oh, that's a great song. One of the first songs I listened to of B.B. King was "The Thrill's Gone." I mean, that's not the most like happy song, but man, was it BB King is awesome. That's Lucille, because that was the name of his guitar, right?
Yeah. So
Lucille.
That's the story of his guitar, really. His story with his guitar. So I definitely had to keep that storytelling thread through.
Yeah. What a way to kind of end this episode, is the power of storytelling. So here it is in another form of art, music in this case. BB King has a song, his guitar. Not only is he using the guitar to make the song and the music, but it's his story about it and how music. Wow, that really was not planned, folks. Listen, that was not scripted and not planned. But here he told his story about his guitar, and awesome. Well, that's a great addition. You too, Eddie. This episode is an amazing addition to the Acknowledge to Action episode inventory now. So I thank you. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for trusting the Acknowledge to Action podcast. And thank you for being a little bit vulnerable. This isn't easy. This isn't something we just do every day. So thank you for that, because it encourages others in their own way to share their story, whether it's here or anywhere, to just acknowledge that, the power of acknowledgement and finding ways to take action to process, manage all that stuff. So I appreciate you, Eddie. I really value our connection, and I look forward to staying connected with you.
Likewise, Matthew. Yeah, who's next, right? That's the last question. Who's next?
Who's next? Well, if you're listening, it very well could be you. Thank you for joining us for this episode with Eddie Arambula. Eddie shared his journey from enlisting in the U.S. Army in 2002 to his combat experiences in Iraq in 2004 to the unit he was a part of being featured in the National Geographic series The Long Road Home, to going on to earning a PhD. Eddie discussed the healing power of storytelling for veterans, the importance of connecting with fellow veterans and Gold Star families, and the need for inclusive spaces in higher education. He highlighted the significance of community engagement and taking action to manage personal situations and achieve goals. Eddie, Dr. Arambula, is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Interactive Veteran Experiences. This is an amazing access point for veterans to listen and share their stories and to tap into the art of expression. He emphasized the transformative power of sharing stories and the crucial role of community support in the healing journey. We hope Eddie's insights inspire you to embrace the power of storytelling and community in your own life. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode. Until next time, keep pushing forward and believing in yourself. Wherever you are on your journey, you are not alone. This is the Acknowledge to Action podcast.